All right, so welcome to this episode of the Fitfile podcast. So we're going to be talking about all the watches. Well, not like all the watches, but a pretty good amount of them. But I guess first of all, you just got back from kind of traveling around France for a little bit. What were you doing there?
Yeah, I was down in Nice for the end of the Tour de France. So there was a regular stage and a time trial stage. So checking that out, get a couple more things there. I've got videos up on that. And then from there, I was going up into the mountains to do a bunch of gravel riding. But it was like a combination test of lots of things, testing some gravel stuff and then testing some watch stuff. So even down in the city, because my bike took 5 days to get there on the airplane. Wasn't good, no. So I got lots of swimming in while that happened. I went out and bought some running shoes because, of course, I tossed my running shoes in my bike case. So I didn't have those either. So I got running, I got swimming. I did lots of other testing in the meantime. And then I went up and tested stuff. So tested watch stuff and gravel stuff and other things. So yeah, it was a heck of a time.
Yeah, we'll probably loop back to your gravel adventure on the next episode because
Yep.
that's sort of going to be related to all the stuff we're going to talk about on that one. But yeah, let's talk about all the watch stuff. So I think where we left off was let's see here. Apple finally rolled out their training load and vitals to the public beta. So a lot of people have tried it at this point, and we got to try it for at least I think around 30 days before we published our videos on it. And it's definitely a big step for Apple to be rolling out these sort of features because they are certainly things that people have been wanting that other manufacturers have had, like Garmin and then Whoop as well. But what were your thoughts on how they actually implemented it though? Like in terms of like
Yeah.
training load, I think first we can talk about that.
Yeah, so for those not familiar, at a very high level here, like in 30 seconds or less, since we talked about it in the past, the way Apple did it is that essentially each time you finish a workout, you'll get a screen that allows you to enter a rating in of that workout of intensity. So how hard that workout was from 1 to 9, or is it 10? Can you do 10? I think
I
it's
think you
9.
can go 10. Yep,
10?
you can
Okay.
go 10.
Either way, all I ever got was 7. So setting that aside, basically
Yeah.
put this thing in, you put a rating in, and then from there it basically develops your training load for you based on the duration. So it's a very simple calculation of your rating times the duration, and then from there you get training load that plots along a graph. In the same way that you get training load on a Garmin or Polar or Chorus or whatever you want device out there, except that the core factor here is how you rated that workout. And there are actually lots of there's studies, maybe not lots of studies. There are studies out there that have shown that in general, humans are pretty good at guesstimating this stuff across the board. And so it kind of works out. And I'd say when I overruled those ratings, so Apple will spit out its estimated rating, and then from there you can overrule it. And so I would do that. And my two graphs between Garmin and Apple with every single workout recorded were roughly trended correctly. The core difference, though, is that Garmin gives you a number of your training load, and Apple doesn't. So Apple just gives you a wiggly graph without any numbers on it, no scale numbers or anything like that. The only thing you'll see is it'll say your training load is above or below that your baseline by a certain percentage, by say like 22% or 60% or 80%, etc. So for me, I like the general concept of what Apple's doing. There's a couple areas we talked about before that's really, really useful in terms of like long hikes. So things that are low aerobic but really high muscular fatigue, like a long hike, 8, 10 to 14 hour hike. Those in a Garmin, Polar, etc. world wouldn't do that well because they have a low, heart rate across that entire intensity, and so they tend to score silly low in terms of your total training load. Versus with Apple's approach, you can override that. That said, my big beef here, and I wouldn't really call it a big beef, I'd call it like a small cheeseburger of beef, is that I just find I want a number. I want to know what that
Yeah.
training load number is. Otherwise, it's way too nebulous to kind of figure out what I'm actually doing.
Yeah, and that's both for the individual workouts as well as your training load over time too. So that's where it's a little bit tough. So very much like you, the effort rating for me, I pretty much got a 7 on almost all my workouts. There
Everything.
were some that were like Z1, Z2 cruiser type stuff that it did give me like a 4 or 5. So I do have to give it credit there. But for my more like balls to the walls workouts, it was still like a 7. I think I did get like an 8 once, I think. But yeah, it was just kind of like, capped there. But going back to the number for an individual workout, at least, this is where my brain got a little bit confused because, all right, so effort rating in my mind, it's not necessarily just my cardiovascular or muscular load, but it also has to do with duration. So, in my mind, I would go do a 3 hour ride and it'd give me a 7. I was like, well, I'm pretty cooked after that 3 hour ride. So my effort rating in my head already applies duration. And as you were saying, training load is effort rating times duration. So in my mind, I would actually increase that. So it's a little bit fuzzy in that respect. So that's where I would love to see that number associated with each workout, which would help me kind of quantify that. What's interesting though is that even with me adjusting that effort rating on longer workouts because of my mental rating on that, it still trended very, very well. So it absolutely still is useful, but I think, adding those numbers in there for data geeks like us would, I think, certainly just kind of help us understand a little bit more. And also having that kind of range of where your training load is in comparison to the past as well. Kind of like that tunnel I think you were talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's my challenge with really that the second piece there, which is that graph where it shows a lack of tunnel, like you'd see on Garmin's, or basically showing your high low values. And so I just have no scale for what those values are. And I saw cases where I would see wild swings with my overall training load, where it would be like, you're up 90% one day and then down, negative 20% the next day for what should be a 7-day trended load. And it was really hard to figure that out and what that actually meant, to the point where it got almost just so nebulous to me that it was like, what, this isn't really super helpful. And I think one of the things I argued in my video, and I appreciate that Apple has this 3 to 4 month beta period, basically, right? And they have a long history of legitimately taking this feedback on these sports features, those teams, and actually making changes. So this is like our case for pleading for this, is that there are countless other scenarios in Apple's sports ecosystem world today where they have way more geeky numbers, right? Like they've got all the running efficiency metrics of vertical oscillation, things like that. They have, cycling power meter. They have all this other stuff where they show very clear numbers across a lot of different things in the sports world. I think showing training load, at least as a toggle to turn it on and off, is a relatively tame step in that realm, but it makes the difference between a feature that is useful for endurance athletes and a feature that will not be used by endurance athletes.
Totally. Yeah. I think one more thing I would like to see is that the app actually is a really good representation, though. Like in terms of how they present the information in the app,
great.
It's actually really, really good. Like I really enjoy those graphs and stuff like that. On the watch side of things, though, I think you may have mentioned it, but there's not enough scale to those changes in for your 7-day period. That's definitely not useful at this point. It just kind of looked like a just gentle wave for me, where I would really like to see that scale increased a little bit more to make it more useful. It really is a great starting point for Apple, though, and as you said, hopefully we'll see a lot of those changes come in the next 3 to 4 months before it actually goes full public. The other portion of it was the vitals piece. Now, the vitals piece is kind of interesting, where it's a very small building block to a recovery advisor, probably at some point.
Yep.
But like at this point, the vitals piece basically is looking at, let's see here, your heart rate, skin temperature, blood oxygen saturation level. What else?
Sleep
respiration rate?
And respiration rate, yeah.
That's right, yeah. And it's basically like hey, things are good or things are not so good. And you can kind of like tease out like, all right, well, if one or two or more of those factors isn't good, like what's the reason for that? So it's probably more of a health tool than a like sports recovery tool, really, at this point.
Definitely. And I think, again, they're on the right track there, but there's some nuances to that it's like not quite there. So did you get any pink at all? Like, did you get any out of alignment values?
I had 1 or 2 heart rate alerts that were a little bit lower than usual. Yeah.
Okay.
That was basically it. Yeah.
So during my entire time of the 32 days, or I guess plus whatever it's been now, right? So almost a month and a half or something. I was unable to get a abnormal value, right, for better or worse. But I would argue that wasn't correct, and primarily in the scenario of sleep. So the other values were all normal, so like normal skin temp, et cetera, and stuff like that. But sleep duration, I had a few nights where either due to like a red eye flight, over the ocean, or just something else going wrong, I was only getting like 2.5 to 3 hours of sleep, and it would show that as a totally normal night, right? And so like whatever they're smoothing that value on, my guess is more than just one night. It's 2 or 3 nights, fine.
Right.
But I would argue that kind of the whole point of vitals is to tell you when something's gone wrong. And so like if it's so smooth that you're not going to catch those things, then it again doesn't have the value there. Versus like for sleep, in my mind, that should be one when if I do a 2.5 or 3 hour night sleep, it should be popping that up as something went wrong that night. Pay attention to your day, and it didn't ever do that, right? So I think that's an area where again they need to be maybe a little bit more aggressive on that, either on the smoothing or on the notifying or whatever they want to do there to tweak those things. But again, that's a very minor tweak that they can make. And ultimately, this is as you said, like a bit of a building block, I would think, towards something else on the recovery side.
Yep, totally. Yeah. So yeah, pretty exciting either way, because both of these features, especially on the training load side of things, this is going to make the Apple Watch a much more useful tool for lots of athletes out there without necessarily having to use a third-party app.
So this episode of the FitFile podcast is sponsored by Precision Fuel and Hydration. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, I was down the Tour de France this past weekend, visiting the pros and talking to teams and that kind of stuff. And one of the things I was checking out was some of the teams that were using Precision Fuel and Hydration. Mostly the stickers. I've talked about this in the past, but I love those stickers. It's super cool to see how they create those. And there's actually some interesting sticker stuff coming for regular people soon, so stay tuned for that down the road here. But the idea, though, is that the pros can basically look at these little icons on their stems and see exactly which products they should be taking at various time intervals over the course of the ride. And of course, these folks have an entire team nutritionist to do that, but Precision also has their athlete support crew for people like me and you, that you basically can have a 20-minute Zoom call. You tell them your race goals and what you're trying to do, and they can walk you through which products that you want to use for that particular event. It's something I've done for some of my past stuff, and it's just a super cool, unique feature of Precision. It's, of course, totally free. You can also do it on the site itself if you just want to use their website to do it. You don't have to talk to a human, but it's kind of a neat little feature that's there. And, of course, all their products are Informed Sport certified, vegan, all are 2-to-1 glucose, fructose, and contain no artificial ingredients, and most importantly, they're actually edible. Also, really importantly, a huge thanks to Precision crew for not only sponsoring this particular episode, but for giving me a place to stay in Nice when I was down there this past week, and also giving my bike case a place to stay. They had a place there for the Tour de France, and so I was able to stash my bike case there while I went off into the mountains and gravel riding. So thanks, Precision, again for this episode, as well as storing my bike case.
Speaking of the Apple Watch, speaking of the Galaxy Watch Ultra. So next up, let's talk about the Samsung Galaxy Watch Ultra, which takes an incredible amount of inspiration, if you will, from the Apple Watch Ultra. So, yeah. Well, yes and no. I have a lot of thoughts around this, but in terms of the actual design, so Samsung went far away from their own design theme with their new Ultra. However, again, they took an incredible amount of inspiration from the Apple Watch Ultra, in terms of like the quick button or action button, just the kind of like, squircle design. But I think the most obvious thing, and this was so unapologetic, was that the color theme, like the one that you actually have on right there, I can't tell a difference right there between the two. No. Yeah, the color themes that they chose and the bands. Holy cow. When I saw the bands, I'm like, okay, this is not like a trying to hide, copying this design theme at all. This was just like, hey, we are completely copying the Ultra at this point.
Yeah, I think the band was really the standout feature, right? So that if you looked at, obviously when Apple first introduced the Apple Watch Ultra, they had the Kraft macaroni and cheese ocean band, right? So that's the one that looked like a bunch of Kraft macaroni and cheese pieces strung together in yellow. In the second version, they changed that default to be orange as opposed to yellow. And so that is essentially what Samsung copied like verbatim. Like it is so, no one in the past has ever had, in the sports world anyways, I'm sure there's some like artsy watch strap somewhere that looked like the Apple Watch strap before, but no one's had one that looked as Kraft macaroni and cheesy as Apple did before they came along. And then to have Samsung copy it that close was like, really? Really? I mean, when you're copying the paragraphs, you're supposed to change more words, right? Like that didn't really happen. But it's funny. So there's obviously a lot of similarities there, right? And not just on the hardware design, but on the features, right? They went down that feature checklist and they're like, siren, yes, we need a siren too, right? Mm-hmm. Quick action button, yes, we need that. Quick action button opens up sports by default, yes, we need that, and all these other things. But at the end of the day, it's also a different fit. Like if you take away the band, anyways, and you look at the core of the watch, it does look like a different watch, right? One is a circless sort of watch, and one is very much not. They have, different watch face styles to a very minimal degree anyways. Samsung copied some of those from Apple. Of course, when you get to the core of that, OS and looking at all the apps and little dots of apps, that looks very much like Apple. But that's less of like, Samsung copying what Apple did this time around, because they've had that for a while now. That's not new. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. Some things are good, right? They added in dual frequency GPS. They theoretically improved the heart rate sensor for both this and the Watch 7. So they've done a lot of other things there. It's not just blatant copying. And the same goes like for diving, right? They added in some dive stuff, just barely enough to like show a marketing slide on it. But when you dig into the details, you're like, wait a minute. It can't go more than 10 minutes in the water. What kind of dives are you doing? But yeah.
No, I think, so both of us are currently testing it. I think, I don't know, I'm pretty darn close to being ready for publishing my in-depth review, but this could be the first Samsung. No, it's not a race because, I mean, I don't know.
Because we'll both be behind.
Yeah, because we're both behind, exactly. Yeah. It's funny, like, after you're like late after the actual embargo, it's kind of like, it kind of goes out the window at this point in terms of like, all right, I'll publish it whenever. But I don't want to give too much away about my review, but I think this could be the first Samsung watch I'm going to give like a recommendation on. I have been very pleased with a lot of things. First of all, it actually gets a GPS signal pretty quickly within like 3 to 4 seconds. Pretty decent heart rate performance. Battery life is very decent, where I can get up to 3 days out of it easily.
I think we do it to back up though briefly on the battery, on the GPS acquisition time, right? Because was our very first ride together like a long time ago? Remember the very first time we went riding?
It was literally the very first time we met, actually.
Yes.
Or, something like that. Yep.
Yeah, within like half an hour of that moment of like we met and then we decided to go for a ride sort of thing.
Well, to kind of put it in perspective too, is that, this was like 6 or 7 years ago when, it took we were basically doing a drone video. And, it takes a while to get drones set up. Like, think about like how long that takes. And, let's say it was like 10 or 15 minutes. I was sitting there for like 10 or 15 minutes trying to get a GPS signal on, I think it was like a Watch 4 Sport. Galaxy Sport, the Sport Watch, whatever.
Had to be longer. Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was
a long time ago. Yeah, and it's so funny because like that has been like history repeating itself like year after year after year.
Yep.
Like we were sitting in like this random cornfield in Belgium one time, like just waiting for GPS to go. So
it was so bad. Samsung has had a history of GPS acquisition taking literally minutes. Even when you had your phone there, like it's just astounding to have it finally be instant, basically, in most cases.
Sure.
You can continue on with the things might be positive.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think at this point, I think there's some really good stuff going on with this watch. One thing that I was really pleased at was that there's their trade-in program to purchase these watches. Holy cow. So let's put in perspective here. So I did a trade-in for the Watch 7. So I had some old Samsung watches laying around. So the Watch 7 I think is like $300 plus or something like that.
Yep.
So I traded in a Watch 5 and I got the Watch 7 for $130. I mean, are you serious? I was like,
that's hilarious.
that's absolutely phenomenal. So if any of you are going to be looking at these Samsung watches, I would highly encourage the trade-in program because you can get these for, pretty darn cheap at that point. But like I said, I think I'm going to give this a pretty good passing grade. Going back to the bands really quick. So the Trail band, I actually really, really like this band, but which one do you have actually? The
All the
band?
bands.
You have all
I've
the
got
bands.
I've got the non-ocean. They call it the marine, right?
Oh, gotcha.
On
Okay.
the I've been rocking the marine mostly, but I do have the trail band and the other thing
Okay.
that's not the trail band. That's also copied from Apple's name, whatever that's called. So
The trail band, it's a very, very comfortable band. Like I really like the stretch on it. I really like how it actually wicks away moisture pretty well. But I'm not sure. Have you tried to do any quick adjustments to the fit though on the trail band?
no, not yet. Mm-mm.
Okay, so it has this like little pin system, which is the
Yep.
most frustrating thing in the world. Like this is one of those like engineers had too much time on this one. They're
Yeah.
like, no, we got to make it this way. It's very much like the the Ocean Band on the Apple Watch Ultra, how the little loop thing you have to kind of like take it apart to
Yep.
adjust that little loop. It's the same sort of thing here. So there's it's really impossible to make a quick adjustment on the trail band, which is, yeah, that's probably one of my few complaints about it. But the other thing I actually like about their quick button or action button is that I don't accidentally press it like I do on the Apple Watch Ultra because it has those little protection pieces on the side.
Yeah, the
So
guard. Yep.
yeah, the guard. So I really do like that as well. But yeah, so what are your first impressions over the last like couple weeks of you testing it so far?
First off, I found when we went riding together, it was September 2018, so 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whoa.
And yeah, I got it. You got photos, and I'll send you. You included some photos and B-roll of this of us riding together, including some shots of you mountain biking, and even our talk about the Samsung Galaxy Watch like V1, I think it was, full review, like in the beginning. Also, when I pull open that video right now, you look like you're 12. So I'll have to, I'll have to text it to you because it's amazing. But anyways, that aside, I just said that to you for your enjoyment factor.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I'm mildly impressed as well with the Galaxy Watch Ultra. I would separate that though. I am seeing very different results between the Galaxy Watch Ultra and the Watch 7.
Interesting.
But starting off on the GPS side, one, like you said, acquisition's great, very solid. Even my phone's not around at all, no problems there. Two, my GPS accuracy so far has been very, very good. It's had strong performance across all three sports that I care about, which is swim, bike, run, open water swimming in particular. No problems on that. Heart rate side, I've looked at some initial heart rate stuff, but I have not looked at all of my data sets yet. I tend to like do that later on. So some initial intervals are looking pretty solid. I haven't looked at all my like gravel stuff yet. I probably won't like analyze that too deeply aside from the climbs because, as you know, like just for a 9-hour ride, like there's just lots of miscellaneous time, especially when you're fixing flats. So I'm mostly going to focus on like the bigger kind of climbs and efforts and stuff like that. But overall good. I'd say my nitpicking, like looking at things like the energy score and stuff like that, seems to be all right-ish. Sleep times are good. HRV though, I'm not sure how much you've poked into HRV yet, but the numbers that it's given me for HRV each night are just like bat crap crazy. They're like way beyond everyone else for my HRV each night, my values.
Higher or lower, or what are
Higher.
you saying?
Right. So
Higher.
like if I have like three other devices, let's say I've got a Garmin watch, a Whoop, and a Aura ring, all give me numbers each night, and they're all like in the 50s for that night of the HRV value. Samsung comes along with like 87. So like
Oh,
crazy, way out of left field high.
my HRV numbers are actually pretty darn close. So I think last night it was a like I don't know, it was like a 39 on the Watch Ultra, and I got like a 36 on the Epix Pro.
Okay.
Yes, I did
Close
go
enough.
out last night and had a little fun. But no, but on some other nights where I wasn't having as much fun, no, it was like like mid 40s, 50s sort of thing on both devices. So yeah, my HRV numbers are actually very close, to be honest with you. But going back to the effort score thing really quick, effort score and sleep both are very much, I think, kind of like the effort rating on the Apple Watch, where it's kind of just giving me like one number that's pretty darn close, like all the
Yeah.
time. Like I basically get like a high 70s, low 80s on energy score as well as sleep score on the Watch Ultra, where man, I can have some really bad nights of sleep, and it's still giving me an 80. So that's where it doesn't really trend well. I mean, it seems
Yep.
like it's kind of capped for me at least.
Yeah, I haven't like gone looked at my really bad nights yet to see how that looked for the energy score side of it.
Hmm.
Have you poked at all at the AGE bits?
No, I haven't. Mm-mm. I haven't
Yeah.
poked at that.
I've poked at that and then I unpoked because it is so nebulous, right? Like if we looked at the Apple trending low lack of value as nebulous, this
Hmm.
is like complete opaqueness of nebulousness.
Mm.
It's called AGE, and even in the explanation page on this feature, which you have to like, you can see a score number on your watch, but then you have to go to your phone. So there's a lot of things on the watch that it says show on phone, right? You've probably seen
Yeah,
this, right? Where
there's
it's like
tons. Yeah.
show on phone, show on phone, show on phone. I'm like, I don't want to see it on the phone. I want to see it here because obviously it costs more money to do watch firmware than it does to do phone app stuff. So they just keep on deferring to the phone for everything. And this is one of those ones where it's supposed to give you some sort of like overall health state of where you are. Mine has been flatlining the entire time, but I can't tell whether or not red is good or green is good because it has me like in this orangey zone that's never changed since I put it on. And
Okay.
there's no information in the explainer text as to what this feature actually does. And almost all the information on Samsung's site is kind of the same, of like very nebulous. This is a score of your health state as an individual in life and your progression towards death or something like that. It's very like very, very weird. But it doesn't actually state anywhere which end of that spectrum is good or bad. So I've got to like, I think at this point, email Samsung's PR people and be like, can you explain, am I about to die or am I on the other side of this? Which side of this am I on?
So is it like so it's not necessarily like a fitness age sort of metric,
I
like,
think it's supposed to be, right? I think that's why they
yeah,
call it AGE
age,
for
yeah,
age.
ages,
But
yeah.
like it's when you pull open the feature everywhere, it's just very like very weird. So it's one of those that I think started off with the good intentions and then lost its way along the way. But anyways, as for the overall for the watch, it's not bad. I would say though that power meter support, I talked about this in my little video of like the FTP testing stuff. That is proper dumpster fire. That's like the Samsung dumpster fire that we know and love from the past. I can't get a single ride to complete to maintain that power meter connection to my phone, which is where you have to do
But
it with.
But that's the thing, though, right? Is that, that's going to be another thing I'm going to say about these Galaxy Watch reviews, and actually another watch that I'm going to talk about here in just 1 second, is that there still is no actual external sensor support with the watch itself. Like
Yep.
The FTP test isn't actually an Ultra feature. It's a Samsung Health feature,
Yep.
which is cool. I mean, in the sense that anyone can do it with their phone. But the actual watches themselves, from what I can tell, there's still no external sensor support with heart rate sensors, power meters, all that kind of stuff. So the FTP test probably should be a beta feature at this point as well, kind of like that ages feature sort
Yep.
of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I
So.
think they really should have pulled that stuff. I just don't understand why Samsung didn't pull it into the device itself to have heart rate sensor, at least heart rate sensor, but also power meters and stuff like that. Like it's just to offload it to the app and to have the app connection be so bad. I can't maintain any power meter connection for any length of time.
What do you think? So I was going to bring this up later, but I'll just bring it up now. But like, what do you think the hesitation is exactly with certain companies who just refuse to provide external heart rate sensor support? Like, Fitbit and Samsung, I think they're two big ones that, really come to mind. I mean, in my mind, it's like the only reason I can come up with is that they think that it's going to make their hardware in terms of their heart rate sensor look bad on the watch itself, and that's just not the case. I mean, there's just limitations to how accurate a wrist-based optical heart rate sensor can get, like, period. And I just don't understand the refusal to add that sort of support with their watches.
No, I agree. I don't get it either. I don't have any idea as to why companies, like you said, I think there's hesitancy there that it's an admission of some sort that their sensor isn't good or whatever the case is. But like at this point, the best optical heart rate sensors in the industry come from Apple and Garmin, right? I think we probably agree across the board on that. And in this scenario, both of those companies have supported pairing to chest straps for, I mean, well, in Garmin's case, forever, right? And in Apple's case, for a long time now. So it's one of those like here's the two industry leaders in optical heart rate sensor on the wrist, both saying, we have no problems if you want to use a heart rate strap because we know there's scenarios where it's just not going to work well, or heck, it even improves battery life of the device. You name it, right? There's lots of scenarios where it's good to have that option.
Yeah, and they obviously have the time on their hands because they're making features like that ages feature, and they're obviously even adding FTP support to the app versus the watch. So it's like this is, I don't want to say it's an easy button, but it's an easy button that for people like you and me who review these devices, just a word to all your companies out there. This is gonna be a big thing. Like it's a small thing, but it's gonna be a big thing in our minds to give it a even better passing grade, I guess you could say.
Yep. Speaking of one thing I will say that did well was battery life. You mentioned that on yours. Both the daily side of it being 3 days or so. I'm probably in that same ballpark. But workouts as well. So I've a couple of my rides of the last few days have been 8 to 9 hours a pop. And I had it running the entire time and still had like half the battery left over. Which is impressive. It actually pretty easily outdid the Apple Watch Ultra on the other wrist, Apple Watch Ultra 2, without any problems. And, I will caveat that the Apple Watch Ultra 2 did have its current beta software on there, right? But either way, it didn't really matter. Like the Samsung one easily beat it from a battery life standpoint, which, is neither here nor there in the grand scheme of things, but it's definitely notable given that Samsung's battery in the past has not been super awesome for sports stuff. So this is like they clearly did that. And this was in multi-band or dual frequency mode as well. So it wasn't like cheating. It had no cell phone connectivity to it to leverage in any way, shape, or form. It didn't have LTE running, though, because I was out in the middle of nowhere, so it just was doing its thing. But still, it's good to see there.
Now, I think what was interesting, this is one of the last little bits that is taking me a little bit more time to test, is that I actually saw pretty drastic differences between recording with the native app, the Strava app, as well as the native app using routes. So routes, just like any other watch, I mean, any other device, it's going to tank battery life for sure, or it's going to definitely affect it. And there's a drastic difference between the native app in terms of using routes versus not using routes. But I also saw some battery life savings using the Strava app, actually recording with it. So that's something I need to go retest a little bit more to confirm. But again, from a battery life perspective, both in terms of the daily as well as the exercise, really good stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty happy. So last thing on the Watch Ultra, what do you think of the actual look? So here's the thing. I have always been a fan of the industrial design of Samsung watches. I think they just have always looked good. In my opinion, the 5 Pro or 6 Pro? 5 Pro. Which one was the Pro? It was the 5 Pro.
Because we didn't get a 6 Pro.
They skipped, exactly.
Skipped one,
The 5 Pro was like one of my favorite Samsung watches ever. Actually, probably watches ever in terms of like design. And they went like a completely different direction with this. And so, what are your thoughts? I know it's,
It's all right. I would describe it as all right. Like I find to me, it's a bit too square. I don't know how to explain that. Like, I feel like you got the inner ring, right, of the, what would be the circle where the marks are all the way around, right? Of the watch
the bezel.
face.
Yeah.
Bezel, yeah. But like, then you have this kind of squarish, as they call it, a squircle, right? So it's a square circle thing. But that goes outside of it. So I kind of wished it had been more circlish if they're going to go circlish. Or more squarish if they're going to go squarish, as opposed to being like undecided, right? So like you've got the LCD portion, or LCD, AMOLED, whatever it is, the display portion is a circle. And then you have the outer edge of that bezel being a circle. And then from there it goes into square with this like dead space that just seems to me a little bit, I don't know, like weird.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Horrible,
It's kind of like this tweener, like in between sort of thing. Like I think I heard Verge or another reviewer called it like a pillow or something, which like it totally does look like a pillow. I sort of think it looks like a marshmallow in a way. Like
it does. It looks chunky in a kind of weird little squishy way. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Here's the thing. I actually do like how it sits on the wrist though, because it has a lot of surface area on the wrist. So it doesn't, the Ultra, one of my few complaints about the Ultra is that I feel like it's almost like a little bit too narrow sometimes, where I feel like it shifts just a little bit back and forth. Like it bounces a little bit, like on mountain bike rides and stuff like that, where the flatter surface on the Galaxy Watch Ultra, it helps it like stay a little bit more secure. So, I think it really depends on like which case and band combination that you get, which is, it's going to be huge in terms of like, I think the looks. Like I got I think that titanium gray one with like a gray band right here. And
Yep.
this looks really pretty good in my opinion. Like I don't think it's that ugly or anything like that. I think it's a pretty good looking watch. So, oh, and really quick, we wanted to also give a quick shout out to our newest podcast sponsor, the Pros Closet, who's also helping support this episode. So you probably already know about the Pros Closet as being one of the largest and most trusted sources for quality certified used bikes out there, with over like 600 or so bikes currently listed on their site, from mountain bikes to road bikes to gravel bikes. You name it, they probably have it. Now, the Pros Closet is definitely not just about buying some random used bike off of Craigslist or something like that. All these bikes go through a very thorough process of cleaning, to drying, to being checked over for anything that may need to be replaced, and then are finally tuned up by master mechanics before being professionally photographed and then boxed up, just like a new bike, and then you're ready to go. And going with the Pros Closet is probably one of the best ways to save money on buying a used bike versus a new bike, and still knowing that you're getting a bike that you can trust that's in amazing condition. And actually, if you have a bike that you're looking to find a new home for, you can also sell your bike to the Pros Closet, where you can get a store credit, you can trade up for something fancier, or you can of course get cash if your bike is accepted. But something that's actually back with the Pros Closet is their consignment program, where you could potentially get even more for your used bike versus their cash offering, where there's still a guaranteed minimum price that they'll offer you for your bike at the end of 120 days, but you can actually sell for more before that time comes up. And one last thing about the Pros Closet is that it's not just about bikes. They've actually got an entire retail showroom that's actually just a little bit down the road from me, where I live in Boulder. So you can actually stop on in there to check out all the new gear that they have, from helmets to shoes to components to plenty of the stuff that we actually talk about in this podcast, like bike computers. Anyhow, we've got a special code for all you podcast listeners where you can get $40 off any purchase of $200 or more. So just go ahead and check out the link in the description below and use the special code 2024FitFile40 to get that next piece of gear that you need. Anyhow, thanks to the Pros Closet for sponsoring this episode. Should we loop back really quick to the FTP test, like in terms of the results? Have you done any more tests with that? I know you did a video
I've tried
on that.
I couldn't get it to stay. So you may have seen there's a video I did on an F post as well in the FTP test, where basically Samsung's claiming that they can do a 4-minute test, and at the end of 4 minutes you'll get your FTP. And I'll save everyone a lot of long-winded explanation here, and that there is no directions on how to do this test, despite like occupying 2 minutes of their huge keynote. There's no directions on how to do this whatsoever. Like even the Samsung PR people didn't know how to do this. So I just kind of had to stumble through it and figure it out. And essentially it is, you just go out for a ride. But first you have to figure out how to pair your power meter to the watch, which as we discussed, you don't. You actually pair it to the app. And then from there you go for a ride. And then the app and the watch work together in tandem. And you have to hope that, you don't like stop one without starting the other accidentally and all this kind of stuff. And so with no directions, I just went out along the rowing basin here and went balls to the wall for 4 minutes, figuring like that's how, if most FTP tests work, you're just going to go balls to the wall effectively for the duration that's required. And so in this case, that's what I did. And the first day it was like 271, which was so-so, but I had a busy week. I had long runs and less sleep, and it was just a busy week in life. So both athletically and otherwise. So it was like, well, actually that could be maybe a bit low. My other FTPs right now from other apps that I kind of trust in terms of automatic determination put me at like 300 to 308 roughly across multiple devices and apps. So 271 is a bit low. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna give another shot the next day without any geese and people in the way either, and went like full bore again, and it was 280 this time. And keep in mind, it's a bit tough though, because like you have to stop the app from the app to make this all work. Like it's not a really clean way to do this. And there was still like, one pedestrian in the way and stuff like that. So it wasn't like a perfect 4 minutes of full throttle as I could get. It was probably like 335 or 340 of full throttle and then some other in between stuff. So I did that and I brought it up to 280, 281 or whatever it was, which I think was actually relatively close to I would have thought for that day how I felt, knowing that I was still fatigued and everything like that. To be 20 watts below the FTP wasn't horrible for a complete swing of a guess. But the way the feature then, so once you complete this whole thing, you accidentally or unknowingly unlock how this actually works. Like, they don't give you a description of how to do this until after you've done it, which is bonkers. So I did it, and then it's like, oh, by the way, you can just do a medium to hard effort, and it'll, for as long as you want, it'll get better over time. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'll now go out and do like a 40-minute ride just to see what happens, just to whatever. And like 3 minutes into the ride, it unknowingly drops the power meter connection and never comes back. And I've been trying ride after ride the last week. I can't get it to maintain that power meter connection, to the point I'm just giving up on it. Like, at this point, no serious, even half serious or even unserious cyclist is going to be using this with their power meter when it can't keep a connection for a single ride across the board. So I'd say, like, kudos to Samsung for somehow getting in the ballpark of what my FTP was. But, like, as I said in my review, that's like playing the Oregon Trail game where everyone else in your family dies and you make it to the end. Like, it's such a disaster of a feature that it's just not worth the time and effort.
Well, this is certainly probably one of those check marks, right, that Samsung was looking at in terms of like, all right, what features does the Apple Watch Ultra have that the Samsung doesn't? And this was pretty much like exactly that. We're like, all right, we need to add this, which, funny enough, it's like Apple's just doing this completely automatically, which can lead to some, varying results for sure on
Yeah,
Apple's
I would
side
say
of
just
things.
to Yeah, I would say my Apple results aren't any better. Despite now riding with it for effectively a year, my Apple results are still way below my threshold, typically. So, yeah, it's not like Apple's doing it better by doing it longer. They're just
No.
they're wrong in a less annoying way, right?
Well, what's nice? Okay, well, what's nice? What's nice? What's nice about the Apple way is that what's nice about the Apple way, at least, is that you don't have to go like specifically start a test. It's just like you hook a power meter up, and it's like it's just going to try to calculate something out in the background. And this is going to be very much the same as like something like Trainer Road or even a Garmin device. It's like there's certain parameters you have to hit, but at least you don't have to actually do a test or go through that kind of like. Yeah, and to the watch itself, exactly. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, that feature needs to be built out. I have not tested it yet, but I'm gonna do a medium to low ride and see how it turns out. I'm gonna go cruise to go get some ice cream and see what see what happens with that.
Well
feature.
played.
Yeah. Speaking of one more thing, Samsung. So let's talk about the new Samsung Ring that came out. So this one, very much like an Aura
Oh,
ring.
wait, hold on. Should we?
Wait,
Are we going to
wait.
talk about the Watch 7 or not?
Well, I mean, the Watch 7, yeah, sure. Let's just talk about the Watch 7 really quick. Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you fly with this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's essentially the same as the Galaxy Watch except smaller, and doesn't have a siren and doesn't blatantly look like an Apple Watch Ultra. So outside of those three things, it's a cheap version of the Galaxy Watch Ultra. However, and I would caution this, that in my testing thus far, the GPS for me has been really bad, and I don't know what's going on yet. Everything's updated. It's just not good. It looks like a very strongly drunk person is running down the road, but crossing the road back and forth the entire time. My swim was disaster. Some of my rides have been really, really bad. Like everything across the board. And maybe I just got a bad unit. I don't know. I could get it swapped out. But yeah, I'm surprised to see that. So I don't really know what's going on there, but it's not been good there.
Yeah, so I have two different ones. I have the smaller one and the larger one, so I can do at least some back-to-back testing to verify if it's going to be just a one-off sort of thing. But yeah, mine doesn't look bad so far. I haven't, to be honest with you, just like your Ultra stuff, I haven't really like dove down really deep into the GPS and heart rate accuracy quite yet, just because I've been focusing my attention on the Ultra so far. But I don't know, it could be one of those, they just kind of, took the 6 and put a new wrapper on it for this year. That's probably it.
It seems like it. They got the dual GPS, dual band GPS, dual frequency, and it did get a new optical heart rate sensor. But as we talked about many times over the long last while, for GPS accuracy, it's not just the chipset inside; it's the antenna design. And if they effectively took the Samsung Watch 6 and stuck it with put a 7 on the outside of it, that antenna design may not be optimized for this particular chipset or dual band or whatever the case is. And so it'll be interesting I'll dig into that a little bit more from my review. Like you, I'm going to release my Ultra review first, and then I'll do the Series 7, the Watch 7 review after that. But yeah, so far it's iffy. But we can move on to now the Ring itself.
So the Samsung Ring, this is going to be very much the same as like an Aura Ring or the Ultra Human Ring. Just basically this kind of like alternative, wearable that is going to be probably more of a health tracker than a sports tracker. But I think the nice thing about the Samsung Ring is that there's no subscription with it, and there is going to be kind of like integration with Samsung Health in general. So it's going to work well in the sense that if you want to take your watch off at night or something along those lines, like a lot of that data is going to be kind of like combined together there. But the price it's a little bit up there. It's like $399, and there is no trade-in offer on these, by the way, either, because I checked. I actually haven't even picked one up yet, because there's so many things going on in my life right now where I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna hold off on that one. Have you had yours, and have you been testing it?
I've tried to pick mine up and had a failure there. So it's not available in the Netherlands, and Samsung Dutch PR people can't get them apparently from either Germany, the UK, France, or anywhere else. So since I was in France, I'm like, no problem. I'll just order it to one of the French stores in Nice where I was. There's a Best Buy equivalency called Fnac in France. They're very big and they have all the stuff. And I ordered it, no problem. Pre-ordered it. It said it should be there by the time I arrived there, and it was not. And it was funny because I actually went that Saturday morning that it was like the first day you could actually get it publicly there to the Fnac, and there was a Samsung rep there of all things at the store to pick it up, and she was like, wow, someone's actually, one, you have a watch on your wrist already, but two, you want the ring too, cool. And so they unfortunately could not find the shipment in the store, and then they learned that it had never been shipped from the distribution center to them, and long story short, it's still not there. But it's probably not a horrible thing, because they did actually have a sizing kit there. And so I took a swag on sizing, looking at the Aura sizing kits, because I've got the Aura sizing kits, figuring they're probably in the same ballpark. And it was, but it's actually, I needed a bigger size on a Samsung Ring than I would on an Aura Ring. So having that entire sizing kit and trying it on, I was surprised to see that it needed a little bit bigger size on the Samsung side. So I'm not sure. I have like 12 tabs opened up right now where I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to pick it up in a nearby store in Germany, a nearby store in France, or when I'm in the US next week. So I've got like all the options to find the right size ring. Unfortunately, while there are many sizes like 5 through 11, once you get to size 12 and 13, the two largest sizes, they're actually really hard to find, which kind of makes sense a little bit if you look at like who's going to buy these watches or rings. But yeah, it's tough to find them in stock right now. So I will see if I can find it somewhere. I will say, like, it is more expensive than I think I would have preferred, right? It's $399. I think $299 would have been a sweet spot here. Still, Aura's rings are also $399, depending on which model you're looking at, or higher. And in Aura's case, you've got a subscription fee. In Samsung's case, you don't. But of course, the Samsung, you are tied to a Samsung phone for this to work, to get all the features. Unlike Aura, you can use on an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever you want. You can't here.
But you still can use the Ring in a basic sense, though, with an Android phone, correct? Like, it's just more the advanced features, again, just kind of like their watches, where...
I've heard conflicting things on that. So I've heard...
interesting.
So, like, in the case of Galaxy Watch, in the case of the Galaxy Watch, it's the advanced features that require a Samsung Watch or Samsung phone. But for the Ring, people have said... And again, you need to separate out, can you manually, like, download a sketchy APK file from somewhere and make that work? Like I'm talking purely like, can you click on things in the App Store and make them work, sort of thing. And people have said that you can't with a Galaxy Ring to a non-Samsung phone without going down the more geeky route, if you will. But I have not double checked all that in the last couple of days to see if people have other workarounds for that. That's what Samsung was saying up front, though, from their press stuff, is that it required a Galaxy phone. But either way, like you, I'm focused right now on the Galaxy Watch, and then on the Galaxy Watch Ultra, and then on the Watch 7, and then on the Ring. So I'll sort that out.
Sweet. Sounds good. And last thing we want to talk about today is the new OnePlus Watch 2R. And this is another Wear OS offering that came out. So this one, the crazy thing about this watch is that it's only $230 for a Wear OS watch that has actually some surprising fitness features behind it. So, OnePlus, I don't think they made the splash that they wanted to with their first watch. Their second watch got some mixed reviews as well. I actually tested their second watch as well, but I actually have to say I really liked the look a lot of their watch too. Like it was weird, but I really really liked it. And the 2R is basically kind of like the budget version of the 2. Now, this is very much like the Watch Ultra in the sense that it actually has some really good battery life for a Wear OS watch. So it has 2 to 3 days because it has two different processors that handle different tasks and stuff like that. But the fitness tracking side of things, there was some surprising stuff that I ran into with this watch. So it actually collects advanced running dynamics from the wrist. So it does vertical oscillation, okay. It does the stride length, it does the ground contact type thing. And compared to other wearables, it's shockingly pretty darn close too. So, wow. Cool. Unfortunately,
it's got multi-band dual frequency GPS as well, right?
I believe it has multi-band as well. Mm-hmm, yep. And the GPS is it's good. It's not there's no failures or anything like that, but it's a little bit wiggly, here or there. But again, we're kind of talking about $230, $230 for a Wear OS watch. That's pretty darn good, So this is a watch that I am actually pretty darn impressed with at this point. So cool. It's one of those watches that you wouldn't necessarily, it's just not a name that you're going to expect when it comes to a Wear OS watch. But I think this one was a surprise for me. Unfortunately, again, it doesn't have the external heart rate support. I'm not sure why that is again.
I wonder if we just throw this into being Google's fault, right? Is this something that in the case of the Apple Watch, it's at the native OS level, right? So you pair a heart rate sensor within the Bluetooth pairing menu of an Apple Watch in the subsection called Health, right? Health devices. Is this something where we should be blaming? I mean, certainly, obviously, Samsung has plenty of control over their devices, as does OnePlus and others. But is this a case where we're better off to simply say, Google, you just need to build it into the OS to allow pairing of heart rate sensors there instead, or even power meters, etc.
So the question that comes to mind is that I believe with Google Fit in the past, you actually could pair an external heart rate sensor to the watch itself. Plus, there's also that third-party sporty watch face for Galaxy watches where you can pair a heart rate sensor to it as well. So I don't really know if it's Google's fault or not, but yeah, I again, I think in terms of...
I shall put it on my questions list. Dear Google.
yeah, for sure. But this kind of just brings us to Wear OS in general. So, I think we haven't necessarily been impressed with Wear OS devices in the past for, I think, quite a few reasons, but, probably the number one has been battery life, right? That's really been a big one. But gosh, the OnePlus Watch 2R, that uses Wear OS 4. That's not even Wear OS 5, which has all the battery life enhancements and with the Ultra and stuff like that. But seeing this sort of battery life now, I don't know, Wear OS, I think maybe kind of growing up and coming into its own now. And this is going to really, really help it, being actually multiple day battery life.
No, totally. And I think even if go back to the Watch 7 for a split second on battery life there, in my workouts where I had the 9-hour day, the watch didn't die. I believe it has something 20% of battery life left on the Watch 7, which is pretty solid for 9 hours in the mountains. That puts it on target for what, maybe 11 or 12-ish at best kind of, duration, which For a small watch that thin, that's a WearOS watch. That's a massive leap forward for WearOS devices. Even if that's like you said with the trade-in offers and like that on the Watch 7s, right? For Samsung's watches in general, your trade-in values are so high these days that they're basically free half the time. I've seen people like quote like $50 for they had to pay out for that watch, right? So like it's a pretty good deal for a watch.
I think what's going to be interesting is, when Google comes out with whatever they're going to come out with this year, right? If these watches are already getting multiple days of battery life, boy, like that would, I hope that's the expectation for, this year with Google's devices. Again, that was probably one of the biggest drawbacks other than probably the lack of size options with the Pixel Watch before was the battery life. And knowing that these options are out there, gosh, I would really, really hope you're going to see multiple days out of the Pixel Watch this year.
Yeah, I would hope so. I would have to imagine like to a certain extent Google's WearOS team knows what's coming down the pipeline from Samsung, right? They've talked about how close their partnership is and stuff like that from a hardware standpoint. And certainly Google's going to know what chipsets and whatnot Samsung's using well in advance. We're talking like a year and a half out easily, right? Because of the way Google requires their WearOS manufacturing to happen. Like Google knows what's happening at all their WearOS partners well before we do, right? We're talking like almost the same time those manufacturers do, right? So none of that should have been a surprise to them. So whatever Google decides to announce, they would have known what Samsung was cooking, even if they didn't know like all the nuanced details of it, right? They would have known a lot of it like a year out, I would think at least. So, it's obvious that there's all sorts of like quirky competitive aspects to that, but such as the technology industry.
Now, does this longer battery life on these Wear OS devices, will this actually influence Apple to go longer on their battery life? Because I know they're pretty, they're kind of sticklers on the, like all day, sort of thing. And again, I've said it in the past that there actually is something nice about the Apple Watch in the sense, the regular one, not the Ultra, but there's something nice about the sense that it becomes a routine. It's like you probably won't forget to, because it's a daily routine that you just kind of know you got to charge it every single day. So that's where, again, like with some other watches where if it goes weeks, there can be sometimes I look at my watch, I'm like, oh crap, I only have half a day of battery life left because I haven't charged it and God knows whenever, so right. So again, there is something to be said about the routine, but still, like, everyone wants longer battery life.
Maybe it's like our 10th year anniversary present sort of thing, right? Like for Apple Watch 10, we finally give you 2 days of battery life, right? Like that's, I don't know, maybe that's what we get. I think the kicker thing is like, that's what people want, right? We've talked about this in the past. That's what fundamentally, when people, if you were to ask people on the street, I want to do this someday. I think someday we need to just stake out a street corner somewhere, right? As part of our thing. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do it right now. This is our commitment. Someday, somewhere, we will stake out some street corners, preferably like in a totally English speaking language place that we don't have to deal with any like translation issues, and just simply be like, ask people walking by with Apple Watches, what's the one feature you want, right? One feature right now, name it, and just find out what that list is. Because I know Apple delivers all these amazing things each year in terms of hardware and brightness and all this stuff, but as we've said in the past, like, I just want more battery life. I just want just one thing. That's it.
So speaking of actually taking your watch off, though, have you seen that little reminder on the Watch Ultra to actually remove your watch to like give your wrist a break thing?
No. Or I've
you haven't?
To be fair, I think so. I find that like my do not disturb mode is just always on do not disturb, and I get like weird vibrations that I don't actually get notifications on the Ultra for sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
I think it maybe is being suppressed because I'm getting occasional like bzz, bzz on my watches, but then I look down and nothing shows up. So I don't know what's going on there. So maybe that's it telling me not to stay on forever.
Okay, so there's this I think rather interesting notification that comes up. It's going to take me a little while to find, but basically there's this interesting notification that actually comes up on the Galaxy Watch Ultra to actually give your wrist a break, like take your watch off and give your wrist a break. I thought that was actually a really, really nice reminder. Like for me, in the morning. So what I do is, I get up pretty early, and I'll start working and stuff like that. And around like, I don't know, 9 to 10 a.m. or so, I actually take everything off. I take my Whoop, I take my ring, I take everything off for like a couple hours, just to kind of just give myself a, skin break and mental break from everything. It's just
Okay.
something that I like to do. But I thought that was kind of interesting for the Watch Ultra to give that reminder. It's not like, it's like almost the opposite of Whoop, right? Where there's just like,
Yeah.
oh, you took it off, put it back on, put it back on.
Oh yeah, because they have the warnings that actually do they literally have warnings to tell you to put it back on again, right? They say off
all the
body
time.
warning,
Yep.
which is newish, right? That's like what, 3 or 4 months old, maybe something like that now, I think.
No, the off body. No, I've seen the off body warning for a while now. Yeah.
Oh, I've only got the last 3 or 4 months finally.
Oh,
And it's been
interesting.
like, oh,
Okay.
interesting. But no, I feel like the same thing though, like with Apple, like in stand ring goals, right? It's like, don't take it off. No, you're gonna leave me behind, right? That's the only Apple Watch activity ring that I care about is a stand one. I don't know why. I started on this trail, and now it's like I will get it somehow every day. But I'm always afraid if I take it off, then I forget it somewhere, and before you know it, you're like 4 hours later, you come back and you're like, I can't get those stand goals back. Like an activity ring, like you can always do a 11:30 p.m. workout to make that happen, right? But
Yeah.
once the stand one's over, it's over. You can't go back to those hours in the day.
One more thing about these little reminders that I think is kind of funny. It's like, those like 7 p.m. reminders you get from the Apple Watch where it says you can still do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like I kind of want just a realistic reminder at some point. It's like the day's over. Just give up. Go get a beer. Go sit on the couch and just just relax. It's not going to happen today.
Yeah.
So,
It's kind of like Garmin's like the day has been too stressful sort of warnings, right? Like chill out warnings, like when it's been too stressful day, Garmin's like chill out. Or if you had a structured workout scheduled, right, on its automatic calendar, and you're recovering too slowly, it's like your recovery is too slowly. This workout's been canceled, basically, right? It's like that same sort of thing. Just it's over.
all right. So I think, so I think this episode has probably gone long enough about all the wearables and watches and stuff like that. Next week's episode is going to be, I think we're going to be talking about like pretty much all bike stuff next week. A lot of stuff there. And we'll also talk about Ray's gravel adventure. Anything else that you want to talk about before we close out this week's episode?
No, I think that's it for now.
Wait, where can you listen to this episode?
Oh yeah. So did you know, Mr. Des, you can listen to this episode on.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm
You can listen to
ready.
this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcast, even YouTube. Not only the YouTube video part, but the YouTube music part. And with that YouTube music part, you can switch back and forth seamlessly between the video side and the audio side. And when you do that, Mr. Des, you allow us to get free pizza. Right? Because Mr. Des and I, the Fit File podcast, reached some little milestone in YouTube's thingamajig this past week that unlocked us a single free Domino's small pizza coupon code. To which I'm like,
You're like, you have it.
yeah.
Can we split
We
this?
got it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We could have got the medium? Nothing? No?
Yeah, all right.
So, anyways, thank you for watching the Fit File podcast on YouTube so that we can get more single small pizzas in the future.